They didn't even let him speak. On the porch, holding his twins' backpacks, the U.S. Marine watched as his in-laws hurled his last bag into the dirt. "You're broke," they sneered. "Take your kids and leave." What they didn't know, buried beneath the land they called worthless, $200 million, an AK-9 who'd uncover it all. The argument hadn't started with shouting. It began with silence, the kind that cuts deeper than any blade. He stood in their immaculate living room, duffel bag in one hand, his children's small jackets folded in the other, his K-9 planted firmly at his side like a silent vow. Across from him, his in-laws stared with cold finality, as if he were already gone. "You've overstayed your welcome," his father-in-law said flatly. The Marine blinked, stunned. "I just need a little time," he pleaded softly. "The kids are your responsibility," his mother-in-law snapped, voice sharp as shattered glass. "Not ours." One twin clung to his leg, tears streaming. The other whispered, voice trembling, "Daddy, are we in trouble?" That's when the door opened. Without warning, his father-in-law grabbed the duffel and hurled it onto the porch. Another bag followed, then another. The K-9 growled low in his throat, stepping protectively in front of the children. "Get your dog under control," the man sneered. The Marine said nothing. He knelt, zipped their tiny coats, wiped their tears with calloused thumbs, and stood tall. Humiliation burned in his chest, but his spine stayed straight. He walked out without looking back. Behind him, the door slammed shut with brutal finality. They stood in the dirt driveway, two frightened children clutching his hands, one loyal K-9 at his heel, and a man who had survived war zones but had never felt this powerless. He didn't drive far. Gas was nearly gone, night was falling fast, and the twins had cried themselves into exhausted silence. He turned down a cracked, overgrown dirt road no one used anymore, headlights bouncing over weeds and broken fence posts, until the silhouette of an old farmhouse emerged from the darkness. It was his grandfather's place, long abandoned, dismissed by everyone as worthless. Most called it a ruin, a blot on the landscape. But to him, it was the only place left that hadn't shut its door. He parked beneath skeletal oaks, stepped out into the cool evening air, and surveyed the sagging porch, rusted barrels scattered across the field, and dark, hollow windows staring like empty eyes. The twins held his hands tightly, shivering slightly. "Daddy, are we staying here?" one whispered. "Just tonight," he promised gently, voice steady despite the ache in his chest. Inside, dust coated every surface, and the air smelled of aged wood and forgotten years. He spread blankets on the floor, made a nest as warm as he could, and watched his children curl together, finally drifting into sleep. That's when the K-9 began to act strangely, pacing the room, nose low to the floorboards, tail stiff with focus. He sniffed the walls, then rushed outside, barking softly near the old barn. "Easy, boy," the Marine murmured, too weary to chase shadows. But the dog wouldn't be still. Something about this land had caught his attention, something buried, something urgent. Morning light crept through the broken windows, pale and quiet. The twins were still asleep when the K-9 suddenly bolted upright, ears snapping forward. He rushed outside, barking sharply toward the barn. The Marine followed, boots crunching through wet grass, his instincts stirring despite his fatigue. The dog stopped near the barn's crumbling foundation, nose pressed to the dirt, and began digging, fast, deliberate, focused. Dirt flew behind him as if he'd trained for this exact moment. "Hey, easy," the Marine said, kneeling beside him. But the K-9 didn't stop. Within seconds, metal scraped against claw. Reaching into the hole, the Marine pulled free a heavy, rusted container sealed tight with corroded bolts. It wasn't trash. It wasn't junk. It was deliberate. He wiped mud from the lid and froze. Stamped into the metal were faded letters and a symbol he recognized instantly, his grandfather's initials beside an old banking crest. His pulse spiked. "What were you hiding out here?" he whispered. He pried the container open. Inside were thick envelopes wrapped in oilcloth, legal papers yellowed with age, and a leather-bound folder labeled with dates going back decades. Mineral rights, land trusts, private holdings. This wasn't abandonment. This was concealment. The Marine sank back onto the dirt, staring at the documents while the K-9 sat beside him, tail wagging once, slow, proud. The house wasn't worthless. The land wasn't forgotten. And his grandfather hadn't left him nothing. He'd left him everything. He made the call from his old phone, standing outside the farmhouse while the twins watched through the window, eyes wide with curiosity. The lawyer on the other end went silent the moment the Marine mentioned the property address. "Sir," the man finally said, voice careful, "do not let anyone near that land." Within hours, a black SUV rolled down the dirt road, kicking up dust. The lawyer stepped out, suit already dusty, expression stunned. He walked the perimeter, reviewed the papers again, then looked up slowly. "Your grandfather placed everything into sealed trusts," he explained. "Oil rights, mineral rights, offshore accounts, long-term investments. This land alone controls access points worth over $200 million. The Marine felt the world tilt beneath his feet. "All this time," the lawyer continued, "your family assumed it was worthless. That's exactly why it survived untouched." The Marine thought of the night before. His twins crying on the porch, bags thrown into the dirt, doors slammed in his face. Inside the farmhouse, the K-9 sat proudly by the children, watchful and calm. "He found it," the Marine said quietly. The lawyer nodded. "Then he saved your future." The call came that evening, just as the twins were laughing for the first time in days. Real, unburdened laughter that filled the farmhouse with light. The Marine looked at the screen, already knowing who it was. He stepped outside, the silhouette of the restored home behind him, and answered calmly. The voice on the other end sounded different now, shaky, rehearsed, polite. "We didn't know," his father-in-law stammered. "If we'd known about the land, about the inheritance, things would have been different." The Marine said nothing. "We're family," his mother-in-law added quickly, forcing warmth into her tone. "Family shouldn't fight over misunderstandings." A bitter silence hung in the air. He remembered the sneers, the laughter as they threw his life into the dirt, the door slamming shut on his children's tears. "A misunderstanding?" he replied quietly. "You knew enough. You knew I was a Marine. You knew I had children, and you still chose to throw us out." Silence followed, thick, heavy, guilty. The K-9 stepped closer, sitting firmly at his side, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the fields. "We just want to talk," the father-in-law pleaded. "To fix things." The Marine looked back at the farmhouse, at the warm light in the windows, at his children safe inside, playing with toys bought not with charity, but with dignity. "There's nothing to fix," he said evenly. "I won't seek revenge, but I won't forget." He ended the call. Behind him, the K-9 remained between the house and the road, silent, unmoving. A guardian. Some doors, once closed, were never meant to reopen. Months later, the farmhouse no longer looked forgotten. Fresh boards lined the porch, new windows caught the morning sun, and laughter replaced the silence that once lived there. The twins raced across the yard, their shoes kicking up green grass instead of dust, their voices free and bright. The Marine watched from the steps, coffee cooling in his hand. Wealth had arrived quietly, lawyers, accounts, contracts, but it hadn't changed him. He still rose early, still fixed things himself, still taught his children that dignity mattered more than money. The K-9 lay at his feet, alert as ever, eyes scanning the land he had uncovered and protected. Near the barn, a small plaque read, "Simply found by loyalty." The Marine used the inheritance carefully, not for luxury, but legacy. Veteran housing projects, scholarships for military families, medical funds for service dogs. Each decision felt like a continuation of his grandfather's plan, not a break from it. Sometimes he heard rumors about his in-laws, whispers of regret, pride turned bitter, apologies never spoken. He never responded. The best answer had already been given, not in words, but in peace. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in gold and violet, the Marine knelt and pulled his twins close. The K-9 pressed against them, solid and calm. They had lost everything once and gained something far greater. Not just wealth, but peace and a future built on honor, earned, not inherited.